Have you ever read the lyrics of a death metal band's most horrific song and thought, wow, I want to read 300 pages of this? Have you ever wanted to read a book that, if your coworker asks what you're reading, you have to shamefully avert your eyes and say, just some stupid horror book? Have you ever wanted to read a book that leaves you in such a dirty, gross state that the only words you can think to describe it are vile, or atrocious, or heinous, or disgusting, and basically every other unholy synonym? Do you want to read something where completely new sentences, never uttered in the history of mankind, for better or for worse, are being written left and right, and you can revel in a mess of depraved creativity? If you answered yes to at least one of those questions, then maybe the genre of extreme horror is something you'd like to explore. Comprising the darkest, most shocking novels ever to grace the literary world with their presence, this genre will leave you with a knot in your stomach and a lump of vomit in your throat. This is a genre where you'll be happy if the worst thing that happens in a book is animal abuse. Now, I call it the extreme horror genre, but this is not really a true categorization. Many books are often lumped together as extreme horror, but there is a stunning diversity of tone, content, and emphasis within this broad field, and its degree of separation from other genres, like splatterpunk, is debatable. So, what qualifies as extreme horror for today's list? Well, if a book is generally mentioned in extreme horror spaces, it's good enough for me. So, the genre is gross and disgusting and really off-putting. Why would someone want to read something crazy like that? Aside from the fact that within the genre are some extremely high-quality novels that deserve to be considered for their own literary merits, I would say there are three main reasons. The first and most obvious reason is the shock factor. Books in this space routinely feature gruesome content that will leave you speechless, with drool hanging out of your stupefied mouth. Stuff that even the edgiest person you know probably hasn't even dared to dream of. As a horror subgenre, this is undoubtedly the main appeal. Extreme horror has the capacity to shock, revile, and disgust you unlike anything else ever put to the written word. The second reason, and one that I hope pushes back against the viewpoint that extreme horror is filled with a bunch of pointless, exploitative trash, is that these books often explore taboo and/or sensitive things that something more mainstream might not dare to mention, or might merely brush up against. There are obviously the darkest varieties of trauma and abuse within, but also books with such unbridled nihilism that I've never seen anywhere else. Come here if you want themes that won't get touched in other places. The third reason for me is that I think the sheer extremity, or over-the-top nature of the content in these books, if utilized properly, can make whatever theme the book is exploring that much more salient. To put it simply, the violence and gore and depravity can make the book's message hit that much harder. Those were the main reasons for me, and I'm sure you'll find more when you dive in yourself. But before you dive in, watch the rest of the video, because I dove in for you. That's right, I suffered through the worst of the worst, to give you a brief look at the genre, and hopefully provide you with some recommendations, and useful thoughts. To do this, I read the following novels, in this order, and I'll give you a very brief and true overview of the books here too. Reincarnage by Ryan Harding and Jason Taverner. A group of people mysteriously appear in the domain of a sadistic immortal killer, akin to Jason Voorhees or Michael Myers. 100% Match by Patrick C. Harrison III. A bald, 30-year-old fry cook who has absolutely no red flags whatsoever, I swear to God, searches for his one true love. Cows by Matthew Stokoe. A beautiful novel about family. Cows follows Stephen on his quest for power and autonomy and bovine companionship? Gone to See the Riverman by Kristopher Triana. Also with Riverman's sequel, Along the River of Flesh, which I won't be discussing individually today, only alongside the first book. Lori and her sister travel down a river in search of the fabled River Man, a dark being who can potentially grant wishes. But to do so, the dark secrets of her soul must be acknowledged. Grandpappy, again by Patrick C. Harrison III. A lovely story about a grandfather and grandson as they bond and become very, very close. Woom by Duncan Ralston. A really haunted and traumatized man rents a room and a sex worker for a night of secrets and splatter. Every joke I try to make about this one spoils something, so that's all I will say. Dead Inside by Chandler Morrison. A hospital guard with a very particular preference for women meets a maternity doctor with an equally bizarre appetite. Exquisite Corpse by Poppy Z. Brite. Two serial killers meet each other in New Orleans and fall in love. The Slob by Aron Beauregard. Basically what happens when you invite a girl to your house but haven't cleaned your room. Well, assuming you're a sadistic killer and hoarder. And last but not least, The Summer I Died by Ryan C. Thomas. Two best friends get captured by a deranged mountain man and are forced to endure just the worst nights of their lives. To aid in the discussion of the books as a whole, and hopefully help the viewer parse which ones they may be interested in, I'll be ranking the books and giving my comprehensive thoughts on them. I'll also rank how good each book is as an introduction. After the rankings, I'll give my thoughts on the genre as I experienced it. Also, if you feel so inclined, I would heavily recommend subscribing to my YouTube channel. I almost exclusively focus on videos covering either dark fiction or philosophy, and sometimes both. You might in particular like my videos on cosmic horror books, or my narration and analysis of The Red Tower by Thomas Ligotti. Also, give the video a like and comment whatever extreme horror books you've read that you think are worth reading. Any show of support genuinely helps, especially since my channel is so small. Lastly, I also want to say that, obviously, these rankings are my own personal opinions. Some things will be more disgusting to you than to me, you'll enjoy certain styles more than I do, and whatnot. If your opinion differs from mine, share that in the comments. But just know that this is all I'm doing too, sharing my thoughts in a digestible format. Alright, let's get into the rankings, from my least favorite to most favorite. Number 10. The Slob. The Slob is a pretty dumb book, and I'm not sure if it was trying to be about anything other than the sheer over-the-top violence. Nearly every time I thought the book was trying to say something, it kind of contradicted itself. The only things remaining were downright problematic, absurd messages. Of course, I could be wrong, and I think the author almost certainly wouldn't agree with me here, but I came away from this not having nearly anything to chew on, which is a really bad way of saying it considering what happens in this book. And when I say the violence is over the top, I mean it. The Slob is really fucking bad. Cover your ears if you're sensitive, but Fetus Smoothie is about the level of disgust that the Slob somehow manages to consistently achieve. The torture and mutilation and sexual violence are really emphasized here, but the book is reasonably, if problematically, empathetic, which does make the violence hurt a lot. But for me, when sexual violence is this prevalent, it kind of has to justify itself, and I don't think it was utilized meaningfully here. And that just left a bad taste in my mouth, which is also a really bad thing to say right now. I don't think the Slob was bad, it's just that its violence and themes, whether problematic or non-existent, were in tension, and I just didn't enjoy it very much as a result. Also, Aron Beauregard needs to learn more about female anatomy. I just don't think some of the scenes here are correct or even possible. The book was written well enough, in fact I'd say it was pretty adept at describing its gruesomeness. A lot of people enjoy the Slob, and a lot of people seem to despise it. I don't despise the Slob, but I also didn't enjoy it at all, and that's why it comes in at the bottom for me. If you want an over-the-top, no-holds-barred disgust fest, and don't need any thematic justification for extreme violence, then you might enjoy the Slob. Number 9. Reincarnage. Reincarnage is a slasher movie in book format. Slasher movies are not known for their deep philosophical messages. The focus here is on meaningless, annoying characters getting killed in creative, spectacular ways. There are hints of messages about government corruption, maybe even post-war PTSD, and you could say the book was about the will to survive or something like that, but I don't think this is the point. Reincarnage is first and foremost about the spectacle, and the spectacle is pretty good. Reincarnage is definitely a gory book, but it is just an amplified slasher. Guts and brains and blood are consistently splattered, but this doesn't have the same level of unspeakable absurdity that we will see later. This book is more Hatchet or Terrifier than Solo or Martyrs. Personally, I like Hatchet and Terrifier, so I enjoyed Reincarnage well enough, but I didn't love it. The characters were frustrating, the writing was fine, the concept, while really cool, also isn't super original. If you want to read something that feels exactly like a gory slasher movie, then Reincarnage is definitely for you. If you want anything more, whether theme or violence-wise, then this book may not satisfy you. Number 8. Cows. Okay, Cows is a really hard book to rank. I did not enjoy reading Cows at all. It is notorious for being likely one of the most gruesome and vomit-inducing novels of all time. Reading this made me feel like I was covered in a greasy, smelly sheen of grime and puke. I needed a shower after reading this. Assuming my memory is correct, and I haven't blocked out some scenes due to trauma, probably the only taboo not broached here is necrophilia. Some of the events in this book were so unbelievably foul and cringeworthy that I actually marveled at how Matthew Stokoe possibly came up with these scenes. They are that creatively heinous. So yeah, I didn't enjoy this book. But I also wasn't supposed to. Cows is not meant to be a fun, surreal, violent ride. It's meant to be a grim, nightmarish, dystopian world where violence and power and disgust are the only forces at play. Cows has a lot to say about exploitation, cruelty, autonomy, trauma, power, self-actualization, etc. And to a large extent, I think Cows justifies all of its foulness. The beyond over-the-top nature of it actually helps to deliver these themes and make them more salient. I didn't enjoy this book, but this was entirely by design. In that way, Cows is kind of brilliant. It does exactly what it sets out to do and does it very well, but personally, I cannot get past just how foul it was. That's why it's so hard to rank. Cows is a well-constructed book, but it's not a book that I even want to remember that I read, and since this ranking is based on my own enjoyment, and partially on recommendability, I choose to rank it low. However, if you want to read the worst of the worst, this is it. Just be prepared. I bet it's worse than you could even imagine. Number 7. Dead Inside. Dead Inside is, to me, a parody of edgelord fiction. The main character just sounds like an edgy Redditor, and repeats his mantra of, "I fuck dead girls," to the point of absurdity. I mean, he even calls himself vastly intelligent and egregiously well-read. It sounds like something straight from r/I am very smart. It reads like a disaffected 16-year-old wrote the book, albeit one genuinely gifted in prose, and I think that's intentional. It is purposefully extreme to the point of trying too hard. Look no further than the fact that the main character is attracted to dead bodies, and the love interest eats babies. And if you start mixing those two, I'm sure you can imagine that some unbelievably shocking stuff occurs, and those scenes were extremely disgusting. Thankfully, they only occupied a minority of the page space. As a book, Dead Inside is effective and not bad at all. It, just like Cows, does exactly what it sets out to do. It makes you hate the main character and makes you question why you're even reading trash like this. It is written quite well on a sheer prose level, and really is a decent book overall, and everything else above this will also be too. A lot of people hate Dead Inside, probably because they expected something that plays the extreme horror genre straight, and they didn't expect something that was secretly making fun of them. If you read it aware of the book's intentions, at least as I saw it, then you'll probably enjoy it more. But I wouldn't say it's an amazing read. Other than being satirical and uber gross, I don't think Dead Inside has much else to offer the reader. For that reason, I place it 7th. Number 6. Woom. Woom is a classic of the genre, and I think I understand why. Of course, like the others, it has the staples of the genre. It's violent, gory, gross, and uncomfortable. Bodily fluids get sprayed every which way, sexual violence is, emphasized, and appendages get mangled. Woom also gives a completely new definition to the phrase giving head. And I think Woom uses all of that effectively in service of its messages about trauma, pain, change, and mistrust. There are complaints about Woom that it is racist, due to its portrayal of black characters. I didn't think this while reading, but I won't brush these allegations aside. Personally though, I found the characters pretty endearing and realistic, which really helps give the book a much-needed reprieve from the traumatic interludes. The plot is well structured, but there is an issue that might turn some readers off. A lot of this book is based on the lack of information, and the judicious revealing of its secrets. I liked this aspect, but I was also able to predict the big reveals and the final scene about halfway through. At first, this disappointed me, but I actually found that it increased my feeling of dread. I didn't lose the tension that Ralston had created by keeping the characters' motivations and backgrounds hidden. I found that the tension changed to something like dramatic irony. Woom is a good book, probably worth reading to anyone interested in the genre. Speaking about my enjoyment of it though, for some reason it just didn't click with me overall. It's really hard to say why, because technically this book features a lot of what I like, but I guess something about it just didn't appeal to me. Perhaps it was the tone. Despite being a relatively grounded, empathetic book about trauma and abuse, I found that I was consistently separated from the characters, and it was a separation different from the aforementioned dramatic irony. Woom kind of tries to be funny and light at times, or at least that's how it felt, and this definitely clashed with what I thought the book's purpose was. I was confused as to whether or not I was supposed to feel for the characters or laugh at them, and as usual, this is probably by design. Woom has a lot of scenes that begin normal or even slapstick-like, and then devolve into depravity. Some may enjoy this, but it didn't particularly resonate with me, so I placed it at 6. Number 5, 100% Match. This is where I'm going to push back on my own personal enjoyment a little bit. Following fast food worker and occasional sadist Bart on his quest for love, 100% Match is quite funny, and a lot of this book's humor comes from Bart's pathetic POV. He is always quoting strange statistics about romance, he routinely commits random and absurd taboo acts, and his sad and lonely musings combine to form an enjoyable transgressive POV. Heinous, atrocious crimes are committed in a sentence and then quickly brushed over. It gets under your skin quickly and doesn't linger on anything for too long. Similarly, 100% Match as a whole is really short and doesn't overstay its welcome. But other than a kind of light, gross affair, it doesn't offer too much of substance, and ends on an abrupt, very weak note. 100% Match, I think, tries to explore a man on the fringes of society, who knows he's abnormal and tries to fit in, but his methods of fitting in are incorrect and he doesn't know it. I liked this idea well enough, and the understated nature of Bart's criminal actions definitely plays into it, but I don't think these ideas were fully fleshed out, and the ending just comes out of nowhere. Basically, 100% Match could benefit from like 50 extra pages. I enjoyed this book because it was funny, but it also didn't stay with me very much. I like to think back on books, and this one didn't stand the test of time. For that reason, I place it at 5. Number 4, Exquisite Corpse. I am also going against personal taste for this one too, somewhat. For me, Exquisite Corpse was a tale of two novels. One half is excellent, the other half is painfully melodramatic. The really good half follows Andrew Compton, a brutal serial killer. This portion is written beautifully, and revels in its unique and depraved POV. This is the more transgressive and gross portion. The other part is centered around the gay scene of New Orleans. There are meditations on AIDS, love, abuse, homophobia, and drugs. I enjoyed these aspects, but the quality of prose fell drastically here, and made reading it something of a chore. I really enjoyed Compton's POV, so switching away from it always felt like a tragedy, since the other POVs were not as beautifully written or interesting, despite their powerful messages. With that said, I still valued this less enjoyable portion because it explored topics that I don't often read about in my normal goings-on, and I really can't express how excellent the main serial killer POV was. The prose was absolutely stunning at times, and the idea of two serial killers based on Dennis Nielsen and Jeffrey Dahmer meeting and falling in love is excellent. I also don't think Exquisite Corpse is extreme horror, despite often being considered as such. This felt more like transgressive fiction with horror elements. Anyways, Exquisite Corpse is really good, and worth reading for nearly anyone who can stomach pretty gross stuff, but I didn't enjoy it as much as the other books higher on the list, so I place it at number 4. Number 3, Grandpappy. This and the next two spots were easy picks because these were the only three where I would unquestionably read something else written by the author. Grandpappy is the worst of the best three, but let me explain why I liked it so much first. Like the author's other work, 100% Match, Grandpappy is funny. But not only is it funny, Grandpappy is fucking hysterical at points. I rarely laugh at books, and I laughed multiple times while reading this. The goofy cover, just the word Grandpappy, the surreal and absurd story, the senseless violence and drug use, these were all really funny. The book is disgusting. Seriously, Grandpappy is a non-stop barrage of offensive and downright diabolical acts of literary terrorism. But the book is written hilariously, which kind of subdues the disgust. It's written in a weirdly flat, teenager-style POV. It's like if Percy Jackson were narrating a surreal slasher story. It's just light and fun. It's trying to have a good time. despite the unholy atrocities featured within. Look out in particular for a scene with a torn membrane. Grandpappy was either the most thematic novel I've ever read, and I was just too stupid to pick up on anything, or I'm right, and the main point of the book is just to be as surreal and insane as possible. I'm not discounting the fact that the book has something to say. There were often hints of something beyond the surface level bizarreness, but I could never assemble those hints into anything coherent. Maybe that's a me problem, and the hints are definitely there, but I think this book is written more to be a wild ride than a thematic journey. So, while I didn't have much to sit with after the book finished, I remember it very fondly because of how crazy and funny the book was, and that's why I place it at number 3. Number 2, The Summer I Died. For me, The Summer I Died is kind of an ideal extreme horror novel. It shocked and reviled me without making me feel gross. It fulfilled its genre promises while also giving me enough depth that I wouldn't immediately forget about it, and it was also just a very well-constructed story. The best thing about this book is the main character and his relationship with his best friend. For anyone who's experienced a kind of bro friendship, you will instantly feel right at home here. Roger, the main character, and his friend Tooth perfectly capture the close male friendship. Weirdly competitive, kind of rude, easily annoyed, but also always being in sync, and having a kind of subdued level of love that neither one really acknowledges unless they're drunk. Their dialogue in particular is realistic and funny, and pathetically horny, without being too gross or misogynistic, a rare feat in the horror space. The book also never creates a distance from its characters. Thus, like the complete opposite of Grandpappy, every act of violence feels very heavy and painful, and just sad. And I also can't say how happy I was, for once, unlike something like The Slob, that it wasn't just women being tortured. It just really makes me suspicious when these extreme horror books end up featuring absurd levels of violence, usually sexual violence, primarily against women. Nothing crazy prose-wise goes on here, but the themes of friendship, growing apart, familial distance, the will to live, and purpose versus chance are all given a lot of development. This book doesn't have the feel of literature, but it does genre fiction about as well as it could by giving a compellingly bleak horror story while also keeping its characters sympathetic and thoughtfully constructed. For that reason, I placed it at number 2. Number 1, Gone to See the Riverman. Gone to See the Riverman is the best book on this list. It's so good that I immediately bought the sequel, enjoyed that, and am now anxiously awaiting the third book. It's so good that I started listening to Delta Blues right after I finished it. It's so good that it's the only book on here that I would probably recommend to my friends and family, despite how oppressively dark it gets. Gone to See the Riverman, like Exquisite Corpse, is more literature than extreme horror. That's not to say it's toothless though. While Riverman definitely features its fair share of gore and occasional carnage, this book is more psychologically disturbing than viscerally disgusting. The book is really dark, and many taboos, some really bad, are breached here, and some are even lingered upon for a long time. But viscerally repulsing the reader is certainly not this book's main goal. Instead, it wants to make you feel bad. Gone to See the Riverman is mean-spirited, it hates people, and wants to convince you that we are selfish, evil, delusional, and sick. Its characters are so deeply self-deceptive and egoistic, and its villain, the Riverman, is a perfect mirror for this problem. Gone to See the Riverman is beautifully written. Maybe not as overtly ornate as the best parts of Exquisite Corpse, but it is evocative and haunting. This book is Southern Gothic at its best, and the ending feels like something ripped straight out of Bloodborne. Seriously, Gone to See the Riverman manages to amalgamate the coolest parts of many different genres, like cosmic horror, extreme horror, literary fiction, and Southern Gothic, and create something that was, for me, the most enjoyable, moody, and bleak ride I've taken in a while. The ending of the book is the perfect encapsulation of its themes because it proves to the reader that they are just as delusional as the main characters. There was never any hope. There is only power and consumption and lies. And the best part about Gone to See the Riverman is that it has a really good sequel, Along the River of Flesh, that fully justifies its own existence. I loved this book and cannot recommend it enough, so I place it easily at number 1. So, those are my rankings. None of the books here were bad. I've definitely read worse. Like The Deep by Nick Cutter, just terrible. But only a few were books that I truly enjoyed, and only one did I genuinely love. But for the reader who wants to dive into the extreme horror genre, which should they choose? Well, Exquisite Corpse and Gone to See the Riverman are barely extreme horror in my opinion. And while I think they would be worth reading for most people, like please read Gone to See the Riverman especially, they aren't great introductions to the actual extreme horror genre. Here is how I'd rank the remaining books according to their introductory potential, with an eye to ease the reader in. Number 8. Cows. This book is simply too foul to be considered an introduction. This is not even diving into the deep end. This is diving into the blackest void where even Satan fears to look. Number 7. The Slob. This book is also really, really gross and probably much more exploitative than Cows. The level of extremity here will be too much for most readers unacquainted with the absolute depravity of the extreme horror genre, so this should definitely be saved for later, if at all. Number 6. Dead Inside. If Dead Inside weren't satirical, it would probably be a pretty good first foray into the genre, but since it makes fun of extreme horror, one should probably be familiar with its tropes first. Thus, Dead Inside wouldn't make a good introduction. Number 5. Grandpappy. This probably could serve as an introduction for a certain type of reader. If you want to jump into the depravity, and you're generally tolerant of almost any profane thing, then maybe you'd like this book. It's surreal and insane and hilarious, but otherwise isn't an amazing introduction because one of its goals is to be funny, and I think it will be easier to appreciate that humor once the readers have already stained themselves by reading other stuff. Number 4. Reincarnage. While this is definitely the least grotesque book on the list, I also think that it isn't a great introduction because it barely features any of the elements common to the genre as a whole. It could probably be read first, but the reader will still be shocked when they move on to other books of the list. Number 3. Woom. Woom is hard to evaluate as an introduction. On one hand, I think it could be a good one. It features a lot of the extreme violence and grossness common to the genre, but at more subdued levels. On the other hand, the book's emphasis is a lot different. Woom is not about the spectacle. It's pretty grim and grounded, even when considering the humor problem I mentioned earlier. As an introduction, it's probably not a bad choice, but there are better ones, in my opinion. Number 2. 100% Match. 100% Match's power as an introduction comes from the fact that it's really short and fun to read, while featuring a lot of what seems to be common to the genre as a whole. It's also free on Kindle Unlimited, like a lot of these books. Can't go wrong reading this one first, but there is a single better choice. Number 1. The Summer I Died. The target audience for this introduction ranking is someone who's a pretty big horror fan, and wants to try something extreme for the first time. To that end, I think a good introduction would be a compromise between something that a normal horror fan might consider pretty extreme, like Saw, and something more brutal, like The Slob. This might be the best middle ground then. It's very brutal, but grounded. It's spectacular, but empathetic. It's scary. It's thematic, but not pretentious. I think if one wants to try out something extreme, The Summer I Died is their best first bet. Now for my overall thoughts. My experience reading these books was very interesting. The first and most obvious thing I noticed was a complete lack of polish in a lot of them. I'm not normally one to care about typos, but they were very prevalent here. Of course, a lot of these aren't put out by large publishers with good editing budgets, so it's somewhat to be expected, but I found that this lack of professionalism definitely hurt my experience at points. I felt like I was reading fanfiction rather than having an immersive read. I mentioned that Cows is a book I truly did not enjoy, despite how effective it probably was. This was pretty characteristic of my overall experience. Reading some of these books left me feeling stained and dirty, and I mean that. There were a couple times where I kind of compulsively donated to charity afterwards because I genuinely felt like a bad person. Cows, Dead Inside, and The Slob were those in particular. I've never experienced anything that left me feeling so gross. Even on my Goodreads profile, I was repeatedly hiding my reviews so my friends wouldn't see what I was reading because I was so embarrassed and ashamed. I also noticed that a lot of these books were not scary at all. Disgust was the primary emotion that they evoked in me, rather than fear. This at first isn't an issue. Horror generally works by breaking norms. Fear is one way of doing that, and so is disgust. But I noticed that disgust is a particularly fleeting emotion. Apart from that psychic stain I just mentioned, which maybe should be considered here, I felt like there was no genuine build-up in a lot of cases. Rather than a kind of prolonged mounting dread, a lot of these books moved from atrocity to atrocity and just couldn't sustain themselves apart from that. For that reason, I would like to see more fear-oriented extreme horror in the future. It doesn't have to abandon disgust, of course. The Summer I Died was able to achieve both. Going forward, I will probably read more within the Summer I Died series, maybe some Patrick C. Harrison III, and definitely more by Kristopher Triana, but I'm not sure I will continue my foray into the wider genre. From what I've seen, there seems to be a kind of arms race with extremity, and that just doesn't appeal to me very much, without some justification. Unless I find out about more high quality stuff, I'll probably watch the genre evolve from a distance. With that said, it's time to end the video. Thank you for watching. I hope you got at least one recommendation from today, and that you can broaden your depraved literary choices. As usual, I'd love it if you could subscribe to my YouTube channel. I always try to bring high quality scripts about dark fiction and philosophy to my audience. Comment your thoughts down below, and like the video if you liked it. Seriously, any show of support really helps. Anyways, have a nice day.